Welcome to the Pages of Light podcast, your destination for discussions of popular fantasy and science fiction novels from a Christian worldview. My name is Tyler, and with me, as always, is Gabe, aka the Quarantine Quartermaster. Welcome back to the podcast, Gabe.
Hey, good to be here. And this book, oh man, I'm excited to get into some Dune discussion tonight. This is a big world. Yeah. We're just at the tip of the iceberg.
Yes, indeed. So yeah, we're going to be talking about Dune, the first book in the Dune saga by Frank Herbert from 1965. And we figured we'd tackle this book because the movie, I think in the last episode, for some reason I said it was coming out at the end of September, but it's actually the end of October. And I was just misremembering when the movie was coming out. So it's actually the end of October that this is coming out. And so, yeah, that's but yeah, so the end of October, I think the 22nd is when it comes out in the US and China. It's actually out internationally in other countries right now. So there's reviews coming in. It's already made, as of the recording of this, I think I saw it's over 100 million at the box office right now. So, and that's without the US and China, which are some of the biggest markets. So hopefully that is good omens for getting the sequel, because Dune's hopefully going to be 2 movies, because they're going to split the book in half and do one first part and do 2 movies for it. So yeah, hopefully it should be good. So that's why we decided to read Dune. Hopefully it'll be a really good discussion. Make sure you guys follow us on social media. You can head over to our website, pagesoflight.com. Check out our blog and stuff like that. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram. Go subscribe on YouTube as well if you want to watch the video version of the podcast. And yeah, I think we can just jump into the discussion. So what did you have any just general thoughts on Dune? It's both of our first read-throughs of this book. So
yeah, so if you guys are listening to this, have a little mercy on us. This is our first trek into Dune. It is a very big book. Lots of ideas, lots of concepts. Frank Herbert's mind, lots of characters. I love how you get what's going on in the galaxy, it's a very huge scope, and all the warring factions and everything. So, I definitely enjoyed it. Definitely a really good book. And I like how we get into the internal thoughts of the characters and why they make their decisions. And we don't do that just for one character. We do that for a lot of different characters, and we kind of get to see what they're thinking in real time during conversations, during the fight scenes. So I thought that Frank Herbert did that very well. He did a good job of world building here. What'd you think, Tyler?
Yeah, actually, speaking of that, the third person omniscient perspective, I think, is the technical term for what this writing style is. That's a bit new to me, because usually I read a lot of Brandon Sanderson, and he does you're in one character's head and for that chapter, and then you switch to a different character, and then you're just in that character's head. So if you're in a conversation with multiple characters, you're only really getting the thoughts of one character from that conversation.
Sure.
So this was a little bit different, whereas you might be having a conversation, and then whenever you jump between characters, then you also get their thoughts, and it's like a shifting, you're shifting into the different minds of all the different characters. So
plans within plans within plans.
Yeah, plans
that
within
said,
plans. So
yeah, it's because you hear both sides of the conversation, and you see how both sides are scheming at all times. It was very good.
Yeah. So it's cool. You can see one character is thinking something, and then you hear the other character's thoughts, and they may be they're pretty sure that they understand what the other character is thinking, but they're slightly off. So you could just see some interesting dynamics with the how the conversations go and stuff. So general thoughts on Dune. Yeah, I thought it was really good. It's not as action heavy as some science fiction novels are. There's a lot of discussions of political intrigue and philosophy, and how your mind works and how you think, and lots of religion talk as well, because you have the religion of the Fremen, which we get a lot of information about, because Paul Atreides is the supposed chosen one, or the prophesied Messiah that will deliver them. Paul Wadib.
Yeah.
Gabe has the audiobook knowledge, so we'll defer to him for all character pronunciations.
And I will still mess it up, but I'll give it my best shot. But I do remember I thought it was spelled with a W like the entire time I was listening to it on my headphones, because they kept saying Wadib, and so I was like, and then I saw it written and it's with an M, so it definitely threw me off.
Yeah, so yeah, I did think it's a really good read, and it's a classic sci-fi. So if you're into sci-fi, you should definitely check it out, because it is the inspiration for a lot of future science fiction to come later on. So yeah, that's just our general thoughts. I think we can jump into a little bit of just like the world building and the atmosphere. So there's, at the beginning of the book, you're on a planet called Caladan, and then later on, for the rest of the book, we're mostly on the planet of Arrakis. And I think I just loved, especially on Arrakis, I just loved the descriptions of the places, and like the atmosphere, and the use of like colors, and how he was describing different places and like the sand dunes. Because when you think of like a planet like Dune, like how can you bring vivid descriptions to a planet that's just basically a bunch of sand?
And desert.
But he does like a really good job of it, and especially with like the creatures and the sandworms, like adding to like the suspense of like the thump and the lump, and where you can like see the worm coming, and it's like this foreboding whole thing. And
it's like the Jaws music is playing.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good parallel there. Yeah, I don't know. What did you think about just the atmosphere and various planets? Or well, it's mostly just Arrakis. There's not really other planets that much.
Yeah, not really. Yeah, we do get some scenes in like with like the gladiator scenes with Fade Rotha and the Harkonnen family. We do kind of get that.
Yep.
Actually, sometimes I feel like I got lost on where things were, because there's so much of the internal monologue. Like I'm like,
sure.
Like, where's this conversation happening again? Like I would tune out for a minute and be like, and then I would come back and be like, okay, we're having this really important conversation. It's between the Bene Gesserit witch and the Mentat, and I forget where we are, but all this important information is like happening between them. But yeah, so Arrakis is a great planet. Wouldn't think of it on my own, and I love the worms, like you said, and I hear that those become like a bigger part of. And they're like considered the desert power, like Paul Atreides and.
Yep.
And Duke Atreides were like saying, what is desert power going to look like? Is it going to include air power? And then at the end of the book, we find out that desert power is the ability to ride giant worms.
Well, it's also the power of the Fremen, because the Fremen are such a daunting fighting force that can compete with the Emperor's elite warriors, the Sardaukar. I think there was one scene where they like went to go raid like the women and children, and the only like a handful of Sardaukar made it back, because all the women the women and children like slaughtered the Sardaukar. It's just like,
yeah, that was great. It's just like, it's our weak and our feeble, and we like took out your elite warriors.
Yeah, so like you can see like how much of a insane fighting force like a legion of Fremen warriors would be, men or women, because both of them seems like equally capable in taking out their enemies, because
for sure
they've lived on such a harsh environment. And one of the reasons why the Sardaukar were such great warriors is because they were on this like prison planet where they were put in these really terrible conditions, and they were forged in like forged in the fires of Mount Doom, these insane warriors. But yeah, the planet of Arrakis is like a step above the other prison planet. I think it was called Salusa Secundus or something like that.
Yeah, I think you got it. Yeah.
That's probably wrong, but it was something like that. But yeah, so that it was just learning about the Fremen culture too was really interesting. And I don't know if it's good or bad, but because I've seen a lot of images and trailers from the upcoming movie, I kind of was like filtering what I was reading through what I had seen in the trailers already. So like if you like when they're putting on their still suits, I'm picturing the ones that they're portrayed in the movie, which I don't know, that's kind of maybe a good thing because it doesn't it helps me like picture it in my mind a little bit easier, so I'm not as focused of trying to imagine it, and I'm more focused on what the characters are doing and how the story is playing out. But I don't know, it could be a detriment either way. My personal preference on that one.
Yeah, it's like bottom up processing versus top down processing. Like okay, bottom up is like, okay, I kind of know what it is, and now like I've seen it, and now I'm kind of building like what does it mean to wear a still suit and how it preserves water and how it processes water from the body, versus the top down, like hearing it and then constructing it, like what would it look like on a person and stuff. I actually, the only trailer that I saw was from like I think the 1984 Dune, which just looked like a bunch of like B actors, and that's like all I remember. They had some like, corny special effects going on. that's the only imagery that I really absorbed before reading this book.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
I've not seen
to
it.
Watch
just
that.
the trailer. Just the trailer.
Yeah, I feel like I should watch the 1984 one, and then that way I can compare it to the new version.
Heck yeah,
because I think I'm sure that the director has seen the old version and has probably taken a few inspirations from that. So it could be.
Someone's gonna make a 3-hour YouTube on like all the Easter eggs that they found between the two movies. Someone will do that.
There'll be a frame by frame analysis done, I'm sure. I think there's a Facebook page. It's called Avengers Frame by Frame or something like that. And every day they just post one frame from like an MCU movie or something like that. I've seen pictures of that.
And they go into analysis on it.
I don't know if they go into analysis, but they just like have like a little comment about the scene or whatever.
Sure.
But I'm sure all of that kind of stuff will be done for Dune, because we'll get at least 2 movies probably. Yeah, people have time, and Dune's pretty big series. So, yeah, I don't know, cultures. What did you just think about like the Fremen people? I thought it was interesting, the still suits, just like that technology, how you have the thing in your nose where it like reclaims all of the water in your body and like refilters it. I just think it's a really cool technology that they have, because they're on such an inhospitable planet where there is basically like no water sources except for certain parts of the planet. I just thought it was an interesting technology that I haven't really seen in any other science fiction stories that I've read.
Yeah, I just thought that was part of the world building, just like the attention to water, and there's so many like of the cultural things about water that we'll get into when we talk about the Fremen a little bit more. But yeah, I just thought the still suit was great world building. The pads like in the thighs are supposed to process like your urine and your feces, and then you're supposed to drink the water so that you only lose 1 thimbleful a day of water instead of like dying outright in a day and stuff. And I thought that was good. I like the different cultures, like Baron Vladimir Harkin, and how he was he was, this like elite caste of society, and he's like surrounded by, you know, high level people in the empire, and how his life is so much different from, life on Arrakis with all the Fremen and everything. And then there's a lot of different cultures present, and I think Frank Herbert does a good job of like building both like I think of the gladiator scenes, and I think of like Roman society, and then like I think the Fremen are more of like a desert sort of people, and those are kind of
like
the
a
big
Middle
cultures
Eastern
to me. Yep. For sure. So yeah, I enjoyed that, and and just how like the Fremen are obsessed with just like surviving versus like the Harkonnens, who are planning like conquest over like the universe and over the planets and stuff. So there's definitely like a disparity between the groups, and you can easily see that in the way that they think about things.
Yep. Yeah, and you could definitely see some like precursors to like a Game of Thrones-esque kind of story, with a lot of the political scheming and conniving and people vying for the throne, which is what Game of Thrones is all about, trying to get get somebody else on power on the throne. And so the Harkonnens are like scheming, and they're trying to eliminate other people who are like threats and who could possibly take the throne, because he's trying to Vladimir Harkin, I think, is trying to get his nephew to be the one that can sit on the throne, because he is too old. He's not going to be able to do it. And he's like, he's really big and fat, and he has like these suspender things that like keep him up.
It seems like he weighs like 800 pounds. And the suspenders, like he only has to carry around like 100 pounds of weight. And at one point in the book, he's like, "You always have to be hungry, Fade Rotha. You always have to be hungry, like me."
Yeah, he was probably thinking, "Yeah, I bet you are always hungry." The way you look.
The voice, I don't know who they got to do the voice actor, but like in these interludes with Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, he has this, like, the voice actor just has this commanding voice, and it's so deep and like resonant. Like I was like, that is the voice of authority right there when I heard it throughout the book. And it was really weird because like in this one section they didn't use that same voice actor, but it was him, so I was confused because I was like, it's always been the other voice. Why is it this new voice now?
Oh no.
Yeah.
That was probably jarring. It's like, what? That's a different person.
Yeah, I was just like, who is speaking? Because I was so used to like the other voice, and I was like, oh, it is him. He is talking right now.
Yeah, you said something about the commanding voice of the voice actor, and even if I didn't have the voice actor, I still think that came across in the writing, just of like how he talks to people, and he can almost seem like he's trying to make people feel very small and like he's above them, which in a political sense he is above them. But I think when you're in that kind of position of power, you almost have to like set yourself apart from other people, or you're going to like lose the power of your authority, or people won't take you seriously. So you almost have to have like this kind of commanding aspect about you in order to demand the respect of the people that are under you. And you can certainly do that in different ways, and Vladimir does it in like a super overbearing and like
prideful,
brutal fashion, where there's like no room for error, and if you mess up, you're basically just gonna get killed. I think there was that scene with his nephew Fade Rotha. That's probably the incorrect pronunciation as usual.
Fade Rotha. As in
Fade
like
Rotha.
Fade away. Yeah, Fade Rotha.
Fade away. Okay. So Fade Rotha, I think he at one point in the story he tries to have Vladimir killed because he wants his position, and he figures out his plot, and so he makes him go over and like kill a bunch of the he makes him go to like the pleasure house or whatever it is, and he has to kill all of the people in the pleasure house because that's where he got his pleasure. And so for punishment, he had to basically eliminate that whole part of his life. That's just like an example of like the brutal fashion, or like even like some of his guards. He had people do a job and go kill somebody else, and then he told some other people, okay, now you need to go kill those guards so there's no more witnesses that the person was killed.
Yep.
And it was just like this never-ending thing of like, it doesn't matter who dies. All that matters is like that the plan is executed correctly and that there's no witnesses to like tie things back to me in a sense. And going back to like the Game of Thrones kind of esque stuff, like there is a lot of those kind of things in Game of Thrones where things happen and then there needs to be no witnesses, so they needed to axe the people who know and do like a cleanup job kind of thing. So yeah, the Harkonnen house, that's a pretty brutal and unforgiving.
They're the plans within plans within plans people, for sure. Yeah, when you were saying like his leadership style, like, and how you have to kind of be set apart, I was brought back to Ender's Game, which we just did, and how Ender felt that way with his, with the people that he was commanding, and I think I expressed it when we were talking about Ender's Game. I felt like Ender did it in a very humble way, like he was always there for his troops, like Ender acted with grace with his troops. Like he understand limitations. He would always try and take the burden on himself. Where then you have the reverse. You have, basically Satan on Vladimir Harkinnen's shoulder. Like, what can we do here? Oh, it'd just be easy to just kill everybody. Let's just do that. Like that's the decision making that's going on.
Path of least resistance.
Yeah, and very, oh my gosh, Machiavellian. Thank you. I could not think of the word. Okay. Like, the ends justify the means. Like, we're going to get to where we're going. It doesn't matter who we walk on. It doesn't matter who we trample on, who we kill. And that's very much the way that they live. In that house, and that's why they all. And when Feyd-Rautha sends the assassin, let's just talk about how terrible and perverse the Baron is. It's a young male boy, and earlier in the book, he's like, drug him up so I don't have to wrestle with him or something. It's just a terrible human being, and like just filthy in every part of his soul. He participates in gluttony and overeating, and the suspenders are the only way that he gets around, and they make him hover, and they say how like light-footed he is, even like he's so big. Definitely paint like a really bad picture. But then at the same time, he is a good leader because he likes to because he does have a degree of empathy like Ender did. He's able to read people, and he said to Feyd-Rautha, I think at some point, he's like, the Mentat feels deeply, and he's like, that's okay, because then you can bend them to your will, because he had that deep understanding of people. And so like, there's a quote out there about it's not your abilities that defines you, it's the choices that you make. And I feel like we do this Ender Wiggin versus the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, and we see how you can embrace either side of being a good leader. You can choose like a godly path that brings people up and builds them up and trusts them and gives them grace, or you can live in Satan's shadow and be living in fear. Like if I mess up with Vladimir Harkonnen, like he's going to kill me, or like the second his rage is like activated, you're like, someone's gonna die, and I really hope it's not me. I hope it wasn't me that messed up. So that's why I think that the they say that the kingdom is coming to Earth, and also there's places on Earth that are kind of like hell. Like, think of these people if they were actually people. You'd want to gravitate towards Ender because of that grace and that, that's a place where the kingdom is coming, versus this other place where, you might have the luxuries of life and it might be great. You might have riches and women and all this stuff, but the second you mess up, like, you're going to get the axe, and that's not a place where God lives. Yeah. But it's a lot of people, seek those things, those worldly things, and then they're happy with where they are. But they're also living in a chaotic, kind of hellish place at the same time.
Yeah. It's like he's a leader where the people are following him out of fear, not because they necessarily believe in like the cause that they're pursuing. Maybe like his direct relatives do, because they're like part and parcel and they can benefit from the power that they get. But like just the people who like work for them, like they're not necessarily yay, we're the Harkonnens and we believe in what we're doing for the good of all mankind, kind of a deal. And yeah, you were talking about like the Christian aspect, and something that I thought about is how like we were talking about like how he's set apart in a place of power. It kind of made me think of how Christians are also supposed to be set apart, but we're not supposed to be like of the world. So we can like, if you're a Christian, you shouldn't like lord it over people and be like make fun of other people because they're not Christians. You should want to like share what you have out of joy and out of a desire for them to also have what you have, not point it out and be like, you're going to go to hell. Like, the street preacher people, it's like, repent or go to hell. It's like, I mean, sure, you can do that, but that's not like necessarily a good way to like convince people or lead people in a way that
it's called the gospel,
like, makes them
the good news for a reason. It's supposed to be, you're supposed to be sharing the good news with people. And Tyler, I love how you call people in the podcast and on your YouTube channel to just, tell the gospel to someone, because it is the most fantastic news that God has died for our sins and we get to go to heaven because we can't do it ourselves. That is the good news. And when people like to lead with fear, and yes, you should fear God, and that's where wisdom begins. However, like, there is the good news, like, you are saved, and that is the best news that we can hear.
Yeah, for sure. In our church life group, we're watching this video series about like evangelism and bringing the gospel to people, and it just kind of put like an imperative on it, like how many people in the world haven't heard the gospel, or maybe will never hear the gospel in their whole life. And that's just kind of, if you just think about that, like the amount of people who won't hear the gospel and potentially will be going to hell because of that kind of shifts your mindset a little bit to be like, wow, like the eternal souls of people are on the line, and it's not just about like me and my comforts and whatever I'm doing here on the earth. It's not about me. It's about what I can do for the people on the earth and how I can bring the good news to them. So it's just kind of it was certainly a humbling video to watch. So looking forward to the rest of those as we go through them every week. Transition from the Harkonnens to the Atreides, because I think there's a very big dichotomy between how Vladimir Harkonnen leads and how Duke Leto Atreides leads, and there's like a serious stark differences between like how they go about leading their people. So the Harkonnens are all about like fear and punishment and like ruling with an iron fist, and the Atreides are more along the lines of like we're loyal, we have a duty, more where we need to be honorable in how we act and how we treat people, and we should have, as best we can, we should kind of have altruistic motives. I think at like a first glance you can kind of see those differences between the two houses, but I still think, even though the Atreides maybe aren't as gruesome and brutal as the Harkonnens are, there's still a lot of like selfishness in how they go about things. Just because like Duke Leto, I think, was also trying to go for the throne as well, because he wanted to harness the power of Arrakis and that desert power, because he knew that would give him the ability to compete with the Harkonnens and to compete with the Emperor, to make himself more powerful in the galaxy, or in the world that we're in. So while at like first glance it might seem like there's a little bit more altruism on the Atreides side, I still think there's still an element of where it's not as altruistic as it might appear to be.
So where does it draw the line between like righteousness and altruism? Like, you know, like I'm thinking if I'm Leto, that he sees the injustice in the world and he's like, I don't want the Harkonnens to have that power. I want that for myself, so that I can like take that hurt away from the people that they're stepping on. Does that line exist? Do we know how to find it? I don't know. I just ask some questions sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a line somewhere where it's, you can like pursue things for the good of other people, but also for yourself, because you maybe know if someone else was doing it, it would be like the results would be worse than what would happen if you were in charge or something like that. So I think it's, and then
I also like war inside myself. Like when I do something, like, am I doing it for the right reason, or am I doing it because I can tell people I did that? And I think, I think that just even asking the question of yourself is a step in the right direction, because knowing the will of God is very is tough. Although I did read a really good book on it called The Four Wills of God. I recommend it to anyone. Dr. Egerich, I think, is the name. But yeah, challenging your own internal motives, like why you're doing something, is the first step to like spiritual cleansing. Is what are my motivations? Because we are so ingrained as people to just habitually make the same decisions over and over again. It's when we like step back and say, what is the reason that I'm doing this, is when we're starting the deep work, and we're trying to pluck out sin by its roots and not just treat the symptoms. Like what is motivating me? What like how do I get to the bottom of this? And a lot of people, we live in such a fast world that a lot of people don't take the time to ask themselves those questions. It's just activity. Like, I'm going to go home, I'm going to do stuff with my family, it's going to be awesome, I'm going to, post about it on Facebook, I'm going to go to sleep, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to do it again tomorrow. And then there's no time that reflection time that's necessary for the deep dive into challenging your own views. I mean, if a lot of us are in the position where no one can challenge the views for us. Sometimes you have to step back and challenge your own views. Say, is this biblical? Is this what I want to do? Is this honoring God, or is it not?
Yeah. Yeah, and we live in such like a culture that's just like inundated with information and like constant sensory overload, and there's just so many things that you could like fill your time with. And like there's so many podcasts, so many YouTube videos, so many TV shows, like there's just so many things you can fill your time with. But if you're always consuming, then you're never like reflecting on what you're like how you're going about your life, kind of in a way. Or if you're consuming something and you don't take time to think about it and reflect about it, then you're never going to learn anything from what you're consuming. You're just consuming for consumption's sake because it makes your mind feel good, or your whatever sensory it is. And so you're doing it without maybe necessarily a purpose. You're just doing it to do it, whether it's to like keep up with the Joneses, or because it feels good, or whatever it is. But yeah, I think like taking time to just rest and like think about things you've listened to or learned or read, or whatever it is that can help us to really come to like conclusions about it and like how to apply it to our own life and maybe make changes that are for the better for ourselves or for our community or for whatever other groups that we're involved in, like how to actually take what you've learned and make an impact in the world in some way.
And you know who would be really good at that? Jessica Atreides, aka the Bene Gesserit witch. She is all about. Sorry, I segued there for us.
No, yeah, go for it. You take that segue.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, belongs to a culture of witches that span across time and influence, the going on, and they are like the puppet masters behind the curtains in this in the Dune series. And Jessica
selective breeding.
Yep, selective breeding program. So what is the official I forget the name of Paul's he's going to be the male Bene Gesserit witch, and he kind of has what seems like access to Carl Jung talks about the collective unconscious, saying that we have access to the memories of our ancestors. And it's really greatly visualized in the movie Avatar, where they have this world tree, and they take the neurons out of their ponytails and they stick them into ground, and they can access the collective unconscious. And in this book, they have the female Bene Gesserit witches, and it seems like they have access to this collective unconscious on the female side, and then they're predicting that at some point there will be a male who comes and has all these skills, and he is the and spoiler alert, it turns out to be Paul Atreides. And she is always a concubine to Duke Leto, never actually his wife, but at the end they're like, we will be remembered of the wise, even though we held the title of concubine, because I think they both had deep love for each other. I don't think he ever took another wife or lover or anything while Jessica was there. But yeah, so they have this crazy skill set that they teach to Paul, where it's all about controlling your mind, harnessing your primitive nature, soothing yourself, and then knowing what to do in any situation. They have the power of the voice and being able to kind of trick people's minds into listening to them. And,
it's like the Jedi mind trick.
Yep. Yeah, and so she passes these teachings down to Paul, and Paul is also sounds like he was partial mentat. So the origin of the...
He got Bene Gesserit training from Jessica, and then he got mentat training from Thurfir Hawat or whoever their I think Atreides mentat is. I think he got training from both of them.
Hawat, I think.
Yeah, Hawat.
And then he gets super fighting from the other guy, the guy who works for
and Gurney
Duke Leto. Yep. So he's he basically is in super secret assassin school for his entire life. That's all he does all the times is learn these different disciplines, and he is becoming something that isn't a boy. It's he pulls from all these different skill sets, and that's why Paul is Paul, and he becomes the chosen one. Paul Wadib for the Fremen.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on Paul or Jessica, Tyler?
Yeah, I think I always enjoyed listening to not listening. I read, I didn't listen, but looking at the different Bene Gesserit axioms or sayings that they had or things like that, because I think there was a lot of truth in what their principles and what they were trying to aspire to be. They were almost trying to be a version of the Stoics from like ancient Greece, where they're like not trying to let your emotions dictate anything about your decision making, and just like letting those things pass from you, and only focusing on what you can see and the facts, and the things you can interpret from like how other people are talking.
Kind of like an empirically based approach. Like it's based on like observable, seeable things, and that's what we're going to base our next actions off of. That sounds what
sure, but I think it's also has a lot of stuff with like intuition, like reading how people are talking to you and trying to read what their emotional state is, so you can kind of gauge how they're going to act in certain situations. It's almost like you're highly observant. Maybe it's not intuition. Maybe it's just like have you ever seen the Sherlock Holmes BBC show Sherlock with Benedict Cumberbatch?
Oh, I love Benedict Cumberbatch. Yep.
Yeah, so great show if you haven't seen it. But they visualize the way Sherlock thinks really well, where he'll like look at a scene and then they'll like zoom in onto a specific thing and show a bunch of words around what he's looking at, to indicate like what he's thinking about. So he'll like look at a watch and he'll see like there's scratches over here, or he'll look at a ring and he'll see like, oh well, this one is clean on the inside, which means she takes it off a lot, which means she's probably unhappily married. So like all these different like observational techniques
I remember
that he's using.
Episode, yep.
I think that's the first episode, but he's using all of those different observational techniques to make it a highly educated guess about what this person's life was like, and like maybe the actions that they would take in the future. So I think it's something along those lines where Paul has the ability to like be very like empathetic in a way. He can read people in their emotional state, but he also has like the mentat training, which is the very calculated, more like computerized way to think as well. So he has like a blending of these two like thought processes, and so that just kind of makes him like a step above like somebody that would just be a Bene Gesserit, or someone who would just be a mentat, and he's like a hybrid of both of them. Which, yeah, I mean, I guess that makes you a good candidate to be a prophesied savior of a people.
Yeah, you're like becoming less and less human, because I mean those things are so human, to be like unobservant and to not be disciplined and to not think about like the long-term consequences. Those are things that we learn as we grow and mature. Yep. But that's like, you know, like he has such a lock on them like at the age of 12, that he is evolving into something different because of he's not
he's 15.
being ruled by his I meant just like in his like progression, like, you know, he's being
his
trained
trainings
from so young. Yeah, like he goes through that, and he's like becoming Paul Wadib.
You said he was 12 years old, and I was just thinking of Ender being 6 years old. Who do you think is the superior being, Paul Wadib or Ender?
Strategist Ender, Paul Wadib for like Jedi mind trick leadership, like having supernatural powers.
But that's actually interesting, like talking about because Ender Wiggin was also the product of like a genetic engineered society almost, and Paul was also kind of part of that as well, with the Bene Gesserit selective breeding kind of thing. So that's two themes in Dune and in Ender's Game about like the use of genetics and selective breeding to bring about like a superior being or a superior race of people almost, which is an interesting theme. Probably
wait
explored a lot in different science fictions.
Wait till Ender's Shadow. We will go deep into this. Oh, yeah. Wait till Ender's Shadow. You're talking about genetic stuff. Wait till Ender's Shadow. That's all I'm going to say. Tyler.
All right. We'll save that discussion for Ender's Shadow when we get there in 2, 3, 4 years or whatever.
Wherever that falls, you know.
Wherever it falls, yeah. Maybe we'll get there at some point. Yeah, I think I just wanted to talk a little bit as well about Paul Atreides and just the idea of like a chosen one or a prophesied one. There's been some criticism in like popular culture that Dune is like a white savior story where like the white guy comes and he just saves the people from this thing, from the Harkonnens or whatever. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on just like the idea of like a savior or a prophesied person?
I was reading the book, and it was saying, I forget which book it came from, but it was saying how this is like a common like trope, and it was like they were like, it's Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker, like the son of a very important person is like is born, and then they're moved into a place where they have low station, and then they stay there, and then they're safe, and then there's an event that brings them out, and they have to go and challenge the person that like basically got them there in the first place. And that's kind of like the storyline that we have here.
Star Wars is heavily influenced by Dune, so
and the author was just saying that happens a lot. But yeah, so Savior, do I have any thoughts on Savior? No, not really. Just that Jesus was predicted all throughout the Old Testament, and I think there were like I don't remember where I heard this stat, but I heard something like there were over 100 like predictions about Jesus that he fulfilled in his life, and there's actually like a rabbi who like became a Christian because he looked through the Old Testament and he saw the predictions about Jesus, like he will remain unbroken, he will like have water come out of him, and I don't remember all the other ones, but there were a ton of them, and he actually became a Christian because he read through the Old Testament. He's like, if I believe the Old Testament, then the only option is that Jesus is the Messiah and he came to save us and die for us. That's all I have to say about the Chosen.
I was gonna try to lead in as well to like a comparison between Paul and Jesus, and how like Paul is kind of like a Jesus type figure for the Fremen people, but he's ultimately like a flawed savior, because I think he's at the very end of the story you do kind of see like the dark part of him as a character, and how he
his terrible purpose.
Like he has these visions of like things that might come to pass, and he's trying to get all this power so that he can prevent those things from happening. But I think maybe it's going to be a case where like he's trying to do all these things to prevent this thing from happening, but he can't prevent it at all, and it's out of his control. And so I think he in his pursuit to be like altruistic, he kind of like loses himself in the desire for power and for like destroying the people who put him in that situation. Like he almost has like a little revenge story towards the end of the book in part 3, where he goes to the emperor, and he, we'll talk a little bit about that in the second part to this episode. But I think he's a flawed hero, and he kind of points out, and you can kind of see like what can happen whenever you put your faith in flawed people. Like they're always just going to let you down in a sense. Like nobody's going to be able to live up to the expectations that you have set for them if you're in a scenario where like you're a prophesied one or a type of Messiah. And only Jesus is going to be the type of figure who can really live up to that expectation. I don't know. You have any other thoughts?
I definitely see the internal struggle that Paul is going through, and he is flawed, but I also think that at the same time he is like fighting against his flaws. Like he's actively like saying like, this is something that I see, and like they keep referring to his terrible purpose, which like confused me. I was like, what is this terrible purpose? And then I think they said like the jihad like once or twice, and I was like, what is that? But I feel like, you know, he is flawed, but at the same time he is fighting to be the right person. And like even like in you know, we'll talk about Stilgar here in a minute. Like even the way that he handles him in you know, in the traditional Fremen society, if Paul is going to become the leader, he has to kill Stilgar, but he kind of uses his power to influence and change the customs so that he doesn't have to kill a trusted advisor and friend, just to fulfill some sort of, you know, tradition that the Fremen had always used. So I do see I see both sides of the coin.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, well, we can just jump into some of the Fremen stuff if you want with Stilgar. I really liked Stilgar as a character. I thought he was a very like rough and tumble, like brutally honest kind of character for Paul. I think he was a really good mentor to him, and he was really willing to like teach him like the ways of the Fremen and to kind of show him like and give him a lot of grace as well. Like there would be a lot of situations where Paul would like they would ask him to do something and he like didn't really know like what he was supposed to do, and then Stilgar would say like, oh, he doesn't know the custom, like let us explain it to him, that way he can make a decision after he's been given the information. So he didn't just like throw him in and be like, oh, well, you can make all your decisions and you can figure it out all on your own, kind of a deal. So I really enjoyed him as a character because I think he did a really good job of fulfilling kind of becoming like a father figure, because his father had been murdered by the Harkonnens in the first part of the book. And so after his father gets murdered, he has that time. Yeah, I remember the tooth. Yeah, that was a good scene. But yeah, so he has like his time with his father on Arrakis, and then his father is murdered, and then he has this time in the desert where he's kind of he has to survive and figure out like how to make his way through the desert without dying and all of these things and keep his mother alive, and they can help each other. And then he comes and meets the Fremen, and then it's kind of like this transition process where he's transitioning himself from a boy to a man and becoming a leader and all these different things, and being the like fulfilling the things that he was destined to do in a way. And I think Stilgar is a big part of why that happens, because of how he like helped him along the way. So yeah, Stilgar was he was a great character.
Yeah, and I think the way that they introduced him at the beginning with when he's with Duke Leto Atreides, like even though the Duke is in charge of Stilgar, like Stilgar like makes his presence known. He comes in as like a strong authoritarian figure, and you kind of like are taken aback, like, whoa, he'll speak his mind, and he doesn't hold back. Yeah, and I just think that he was a good character throughout the book. I mean, you basically hit all the highlights that I would talk about. So, yeah. No,
Sorry, you can expand on one of them if you thought one of them was particularly really good.
You know what? I'm having trouble remembering like the specifics of Stilgar, like the different things.
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm gonna leave it with what you said.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think I liked the first meeting between Stilgar whenever they get out of the desert and they get into that little cave and all the Fremen are there like waiting for them. And he has that like initial fight with that Jamis, I think is his name. And I think it's interesting that like that custom where like Jamis picks the fight and Paul kills Jamis, and so Paul kills one of their own people. And I think in like a lot of situations in a lot of cultures, like if somebody that's of your own kin was murdered, you'd want to get like revenge on them, but their custom is like no,
and by an outsider.
Yeah,
like not part of the culture, you would get kicked out or ostracized.
Yeah,
or
for sure.
something.
But like, because it was part of their customs that if he were to pick this fight with an outsider and he would lose, then there's no revenge to be had, because that was like completely on Jamis, and he lost, and he instigated the fight to begin with. So I don't know, I just thought it was interesting. And then he has to, like, because of that situation, like, he has to like take Jamis's place in a sense. So like that's his like initiation into the Fremen culture, and then Stilgar like walks him through the whole process. Yeah, I love that whole kind of
that was a
walk
very
into the
like,
culture.
Yeah, it was very like so you learn about this fight, this battle, and how you like take the place of the person that you've killed, and then you have to accept their water, which means what was the term that they used? They rendered the water out of him. The word render is just like, ooh, like like disintegrating, like getting all the matter and then the water separated, and you have to accept the water. That was like crazy. And then that, again, just that world building of like, water is precious. It is the most important thing. You have to have it. It doesn't matter how gross it is. It doesn't matter that it came out of someone else's body that you've killed 10 minutes ago. You have to accept the water, because it's all about the survival of the tribe. And and then then he cries because Paul is an empathetic character, and he gave moisture to the dead. And then he's introduced to I think we're saying Chani, and that is think is Jamis's wife. And
no, that's
they had a kid.
That's not his wife. His wife was Hara.
Okay.
And so she had the two kids or whatever.
Yep, one with him and one with Jamis, and then one with a previous
person.
And then so Stilgar explains, like, this is your woman, and you can either accept her as your wife or as your slave. And he's like, well, and Paul is like, well, what can I change that? He's like, you have a year to decide whether this is going to be a permanent thing. Is it going to be just the servant, or and then she ends up loving Paul, like, right from the get-go. And she was just like, he was Jamis was really good with the kids, but like, I'm willing to accept you as like my new person, and I'm going to listen to you. And that is so foreign to us as Americans, where we're like,
she was almost like grieved that Paul made her his servant instead of his wife.
Was. Yeah. She's like, I'm still young. I'm still
young enough. Yeah. I'm still young enough. Why am I your servant? Yeah, I just don't think Paul was like, he was not in the mindset to be like, oh yeah, sure, I'll be your wife, or you'll be my wife. That's great.
He's 16 years old. He's not looking for commitment at the moment.
Yeah, right. Listen, I just showed up here. I can't make any commitments like this right now.
Yeah. Yeah, so I just thought that was a really good introduction into like the Fremen culture and how wildly different it is from our own culture here in the U.S., but also like in other parts of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I guess the last major Fremen character is Shani or Chane, or however we're pronouncing her name. It's probably incorrect all the ways. We're sorry, everybody.
I was like, I got all the names. I've got like the Fremen, the Sardaukar, like Vladimir Harkin, and then like these smaller characters. I'm like second guessing myself, or I can't remember. I will do it. I will send you a list of how to say people's names. I will do it.
But so she is she's the person that Paul sees in his visions when he dreams about the planet of Arrakis. And so whenever he sees her, then he's like, oh, I know who you are. And she kind of becomes his lover. He doesn't make her his wife or anything, but they live together. They have a kid together who they name Leto after his father. And I think she's just kind of like his like support system and somebody who like believes in what he's doing and his purpose. And I think like he doesn't necessarily, because he's lost a lot of people in his life, he doesn't necessarily have a lot of intimate friendships or relationships with people that aren't like an authority over him. Like he has his mother, but like there's a difference between like a parent son relationship and somebody who you kind of view as like almost your equal, that's maybe an age in some way. And so I think she was kind of a good person where he could like talk about his home and like process things that he's like struggling with in some ways. So yeah, I think she was a cool character.
Yeah, I like how he was he like learns about her early on, and then like she becomes like his reality like halfway through the book.
Yep.
Yeah, other than that, I don't have too many observations on her.
She wasn't like a big character. I think in the movie they're making her seem like a bigger character than she was, because we really don't get a lot of her until like at least halfway into the book. We don't actually physically meet her, and then even when we do meet her, she's not in like every scene, and so there's just not a lot of there's not a lot of big events that are like centered around her as a character. She's obviously the father of one of his sons, but spoiler, he gets killed. But yeah, so I don't know. I don't think it's a big deal that we don't have a ton to say about her. I just think she's a good character for Paul, in his transition to being an Atreides to a Fremen, and helping him along the way there. Yeah, I think probably getting to a good stopping place here. One thing I wanted to end on, I kind of wanted to add a new segment to the podcast, but I didn't tell Gabe about this beforehand, so I just kind of thought this up on the spot. But I think it would be cool if we could give like a favorite quote from the books that we've been reading, or something that really like impacted us, or something that we really thought was meaningful. And one of the quotes towards the very beginning of the book, on page 10, and I think this is quoted a lot in the trailers for the movie as well, where Paul is saying something about fear. And I'll just read this quote, and it says, "I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me, and when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain." And I think I just really loved that passage, just because, specifically from a Christian worldview perspective, there's a lot of times in the Bible where Jesus tells us to not fear, do not be afraid, and all these types of things. And this kind of parallels that same sentiment for Christians, where like we can have fear, but we need to face the fear and realize that like we have power over the fear. We can control our emotions, and by being able to do that, we can not let our emotions control how we make decisions, and to be I guess like not make rash decisions, and really focus on what we can control, and realize that God is in control and not us, and that we don't have a reason to fear, because he has us in the palm of his hand, and he controls our destinies here on earth and our eternal destinies, whether that's having eternal life or eternal damnation. So there's really nothing for us to fear, although it's hard for us to always like live that out. Of course, we're still going to have things that we're afraid of, because we can't live perfectly. But I don't know, do you have any thoughts on that passage, or just fear in general as a Christian?
I can build off that a little bit. So when you started saying that, I thought about Ephesians 6, where it talks about the armor of God, and It has the helmet of salvation, the breastplate of righteousness, the belt of truth, the sword of the Spirit, the shield of faith, and the feet of peace. And I kind of think that would kind of fall under the shield of faith. And if we have deep faith, we can learn to cast our cares on the Lord. We don't depend on our own understanding, but we look to the Lord in all things. And there can be a certain peace in that. And then in a personal example, this is going to be such a random example. Like some of my kids, so I work with a very unique population at my school, and this one student brought in a water bottle and like threatened to like squirt it all over like my work clothes. And like my thing with the kids is like, I'm the adult. I'm like, I've been a teacher too long to be like gotten by the kids and like to get upset. So like she goes and like gets it real close to me and like fake like squirts it on me, and I have zero reaction. And then like she immediately turns to the person next to me and just squirts them like all over them. And I was just like, I think I had my God armor on in that moment. I don't know how, but it protected me from getting sprayed with the water. So I don't know if that's a real thing, but I believed it in that moment. No, but I do like the quote. I'm just looking at it one more time. Fear is the mind killer. It's the little death that brings total obliteration. I also think that you have an obsession with getting rid of your fear. You talked about lock and key, that girl going into her mind and locking her fear up in a coffin and burying it in the backyard.
Yeah, that's good.
But yeah, I think, it is a good scene. But yeah, I think, we can just turn to God in those situations where we have fear and we lean not on our own understanding, but we turn to God in all things and we cast our anxieties upon him. Yep. That's a good quote. I'll have to do a favorite quote when I know that there's a favorite quote section of the podcast coming up.
Sorry. As you know, we're novice podcasters, so
listen,
just decide like on the fly. This is a new thing I want to do.
Cool. We're gonna try lots of different things. We'll get there, Tyler. We'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there. I just think I like that quote because also like fear is the mind killer. Just because you like if you have so much fear in your life and you're being consumed by your fear, like you're not able to make decisions. You're paralyzed by your fear. And it is like being a mind killer because it stops you from thinking objectively about whatever decision you need to make or whatever action you need to take. Like you've heard the term of people like freezing in like high stress situations where they lock up and they can't like do anything. And that's just like a situation where the fear has just completely consumed them and they have no idea how to act or they can't make a decision at all. And it will bring total obliteration to either yourself or the people around you who are going to be impacted by whatever decisions you're making. So yeah, I just think that's a great quote. And there's a ton of other quotes, but you can't go through all of them. So you just have to read Dune and experience all of the cool quotes for yourself. So yeah, that's going to do it for this episode. Next episode, we're going to be doing part 2 of this Dune discussion. So we'll talk more about some of the story aspects, kind of just follow Paul's story to the very end. And then we'll go from there. If you want to see more content from Pages of Light, make sure you head over to our website, see our blog, and also make sure you go over to our YouTube channel and subscribe. You can watch the video version of the podcast over there, and you can also see some of the other videos that I've created if you want to check those out. You can follow us on social media, of course, Facebook, Instagram, all those things. And you can follow Gabe at neighborhoodnerdservices.com. And yeah, all those things will be in the description. Please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast app you're listening on. Leave us a 5-star review and give us a little note about why you like the podcast. If we get someone with an actual review instead of just rating it, I'll try to read it on the podcast. So we'll give you a shout out there if you go leave a review. Yeah, I don't know. Gabe, any last thoughts about podcast Dune? Anything?
Yeah, Dune is a great book, and yeah, I hope we can, if we revisit it, we'll do it some more justice. Don't you think, Tyler?
Yeah, for sure. We could probably do like a ton of podcasts on specific aspects of
there's a ton
Dune
of
as a
material.
book. Like even just like that quote I read. Like you could do a whole podcast on like fear
Different
in
quotes.
Dune and how it applies to your life and how Christians can think about fear. Like you could do a whole 40-minute hour podcast on that. But we will use the time, use what we have with the time that we are given. So great. That's going to wrap this up. Thanks for listening or watching. Remember to keep reading and share the gospel with somebody this week. And we will see you guys in the next episode. See ya.